recording. So thank you for joining us for our Building a CS Pathway Through Student Recruitment webinar. This is offered through the National Center for Computer Science Education, which is the home of Mobile CSP and CS Awesome. Just as a few reminders, I am recording and have enabled full transcription, live transcription. And if you would like, you are welcome to raise your hand or type into the chat any questions that you have for the duration of the webinar. And some introductions. So I am Pauline Lake. I am the Curriculum and PD Coordinator for the National Center for Computer Science Education. And I am thrilled to have tonight two wonderful guest speakers to share their experiences with you and tips and tricks for student recruitment. So we have Bobbi-Jo Wathen with us from Counselors for Computing. And a little bit later, we'll have Jennifer Manley with us from the Computer Science Teachers Association. She's also a master teacher with the University of Maryland's Terrapin Teachers. Bobbi-Jo, if you'd like to say hello, you're welcome to do that. I am just going to briefly launch a poll to those who are here. Tell us a little bit about what you're teaching.
Yeah, while you guys are answering that, for those of you who joined us, after we started talking, Bobbi-Jo Wathen, school counselor at Middletown High School in Connecticut. I've been with NCWIT now for about 5 years, maybe even 6. And so, I basically help teachers, counselors, and administrators understand how they can, use their power to diversify the computer science workforce and our classes. So hopefully tonight I can give you guys some of the counselor tips and how you can get other counselors on your side. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you, Bobbi-Jo. Excited to have you. You're welcome to complete the poll and introduce yourself if you would like in the chat. And just give it another 30 seconds or so for those who would like to participate in the poll. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And we can share that. So we have CS Awesome represented, 3 to 4 years of teaching experience. Good to know that you know who your school guidance counselor is, and possibly looking at 80-20 as your male to female student ratio. So we're going to dive into that, but just so you have that background, Bobbi-Jo, you know who is with us. All right, so we're going to just dive into talking about what is a CS pathway and kind of give some background behind that. We also have a student recruitment action plan that we invite and challenge all of our educators to take part in making sure that they are broadening participation in their schools. And then we'll talk with Bobbi-Jo about Counselors for Computing and how that is a great resource. And we'll hear from Jen a little bit later on her recruitment strategies and what she does to recruit students into her classes. So when we are talking at the center about a possible track of CS courses, this track that you see here is often the one that we see and recommend. Of course, this is not the only pathway that exists. In fact, those of you on the webinar may have a different pathway that you have at your school currently. But one that we often suggest here and we see emerging is having a intro exploring computer science course that is then followed by a computer science principles program. It includes programming, but the other principles of computer science are also involved. And then moving students on to that AP Computer Science A, which is focusing on Java programming. And the goal of having a pathway, right, and we're thinking of this, it's always to broaden participation in computing, right? We have low number of females and minorities taking the AP Computer Science A course and the Computer Science Principles course and ECS, right? They were developed to help push more students and get them interested in taking and eventually going into the Computer Science A course. One thing that I want to point out here that definitely can be a barrier, and it may be something that you're experiencing at your school is, notice, our pathway, this possible track is considered um, by having two AP classes. And at your school, you may consider, well, maybe AP advanced placement isn't best for my students, and I just want to do what we call a non-AP class. Or maybe you're in a state where dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment is a better fit for your students. Again, there are other variations, other possibilities. This is just one that we see emerging at the center, and that is also in part due in part to the fact that we have mobile CSP, which is an AP Computer Science Principles endorsed provider, and then we have CS Awesome, which is an AP CSA College Board endorsed provider. So our possible track focuses on the AP lens, but we encourage you to think about non-AP courses, other courses that you could possibly add that might be of interest to your students as well. And the other thing about this possible track, definitely looking at 8 through 12, grades 8 through 12, could go as low as 7th grade, really a focus on the high school, more of the high school level of students. So the Inclusive CS Teaching Site is a resource that I wanted to just briefly share with you about where you can go for information on recruitment. The National Center for Computer Science has created this website. You are welcome to visit it, so inclusivcsteaching.org. Tonight we're going to spend time talking about a lot of the resources that are available on our active recruiting page. Okay, so invite you to take a look, inclusivcsteaching.org. One of the things that we would like to invite you to do with some of the ideas that you have tonight is to be thinking about making an action plan. It is one thing to hear all the different strategies and goals, but then to think about how they are fitting with your particular school and what your school is focusing on for your pathway or your demographics. So as you hear tonight from our speakers, feel free to complete the student recruitment action plan, and I can definitely put a link to the recruitment handbook that we have. Lots of great resources again for you to check out, and you can get access to the action plan there. So that link is in the chat, and feel free to take a look at that and make an action plan that you can refer back to and check, a couple months from now, how are you progressing? Again, we're doing this webinar in September. Seems early. We're really trying to promote the idea that it's all about active recruiting, and the things that you do and say now are what matter to help make sure that you are getting students enrolled for the next year and beyond. One of the things that you'll see on that site at that link is this little graphic organizer on what influences CS enrollment. So there are what we call factors and stakeholders. And all of you are definitely stakeholders. You are teachers or counselors that are implementing computer science and advocating for computer science. But all of these other factors that are on the left, you may see that they're going to influence your student enrollment. You could think about how one or more of these might be a focus for your action plan. And I believe I'm going to hand it over to Bobbi-Jo to talk a little bit about Counselors for Computing.
Hi. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in on a Tuesday night of an already long week as educators. So kudos to you guys, and thank you so much. And those of you guys watching this after, again, thank you for using some more of your personal time to join and figure out how to recruit some more folks. So this first slide here is really just talking about why are we talking about our school counselors. I think based on some of our pre-conversation, a lot of you guys understand why school counselors are such a big, important role in bridging that gap and broadening participation. And so what's very hard is, as teachers, and thinking about expanding who's in your classes, it's kind of hard to do that alone. This nice little graph, I love it. School counselors work with all of these stakeholders. Synchronously, asynchronously, all over the place. We're meshed together, and we listen and hear from all of our stakeholders and work with them in developing some very specific systematic solutions to some of these barriers, right? And how can we work with parents and families? But more specifically, how can we also work with our teachers and our administrators to make sure that things make sense so that you can increase your participation in your computer science classes and build better pathways? So go ahead, let's go to the next slide. So computer science, counselors for computing came up with 10 ways that we suggest that administrators and teachers engage with school counselors to help this process along, because not every school counselor is as dedicated to computer science as everyone else, right? And so I think the very first thing is demystifying what computer science is. If you jumped in, I was talking about a teacher at my very first school that I worked at, who just invited me to come along to some conferences. She invited me into class when they were doing the hour of code. She invited me to participate in the hour of code, no matter how uncomfortable with coding I thought I was. And that really helped me understand that computer science and the courses aren't only for AP calculus students. And that was huge for me. Let's go to that next one. So 2 is just repositioning computing and computing jobs. So a big part of the school counselor's role is post-secondary planning. And a lot of times we're trying to help students find a career fit based on their interests. And the more that we can understand how computer science plays a role in every industry right now, the more we can talk about it with students. Because the reality is that if you want to be a psychologist right now, you may also need to know how to make a website, to recruit clients, maybe how to work some of social media and things like that. So it really is everywhere. So the more that you can talk to them about that, the better. This Careers with Code magazine, it is available on NCWIT's website as a digital magazine as well. So you can, go through. There are some great pages that show nice graphics that students do interact with really nicely about jobs that include computer science as a major element. Let's go to the next one. So the third one is helping school counselors and students see that tech jobs are everywhere. And so not just in Silicon Valley, not just in large cities, but every company, period, major or minor, has some type of tech required in order for them to operate. Right now we're talking a lot about cybersecurity in our world, and that's everything from your mom and pop shop that has like a digital EOS system or point of sale system, to your Fortune 500 companies, or our good old iPhones, which we know about all the security issues with these, right? So we want to help the counselors see that they're everywhere, and you can do this again with the magazine, but also maybe like shoot them an email that said with like some recent postings, or like a screenshot of Indeed and the current tech jobs that are out in your area, because that's what makes it real. Let's jump to the next. All right, so number 4 is sit with your school counselors and look at the master schedule. And we talked about this a little bit before with Jeanette. It seems like if I was viewing her issue from a school counselor perspective, there's probably not a lot of classes available during the period that is her class. So it tends to be a class, because it's accessible, that a lot of students end up in, whether they want it or not, because students need to be somewhere, right? And so sitting with your school counselor or whoever does your master schedule and seeing where are the computer science classes, are there barriers, right? Is maybe a computer science class the same time that a different class that a lot of students like that are also taking computer science? How can we shift things around? I think a lot of times teachers are so far away from the master schedule. It's like this thing that magically appears in, you know, whatever computer system you guys are using for your student information systems. But if you ask to have the conversation with your administrator and your counselors about what's happening in the master schedule, you will most likely be involved with where your classes fall, which is nice because we also like to have the good periods off. Let's go to the next one. All right, so number 5, data. So track who's been taking CS, maybe even sit down with your counselor and make some goals about diversifying the class. At the current school I'm at now, there are some new courses that were developed within the field of tech, and those teachers came to us and they did a presentation with us that talked about the classes and talked about the goals for students enrolling and what their long-term plan was, which was really helpful to understand the full pathway and what students I was going to be recommending for those classes. But also like just set some goals like with the counselors, right? Let's go ahead to number 5. We're halfway through our top 10. All right, so you want to present computer science as a way to achieve equitable outcomes for all students. And I remember developing this one specifically back in 2016, when I first learned all about computer science and what it could do. What I held on to the most as a counselor was that computer science was a way to solve economic problems for some of my most disadvantaged students. So because the opportunities are vast and they offer very good incomes, this could change things like generational wealth. It could change, you know, a whole family's trajectory. And I know it's a lot to put on a student, so we're not going to put that on a student, but it definitely can solve some of our economic problems within our communities. And so presenting it that way to your school counselors, remember your school counselors have goals just like you have goals. And some of them are to make sure that or the most important ones, I should say, are to make sure that our students are excited about what's happening next for them and they feel secure in the job opportunities. So, I mean, what a better way to do it than CS, right? Let's go to number 7. All right, so we want to paint a picture of who does computing, right? And it says a fresh picture here because I think a lot of people still have the idea that computing are people who write code or play around with computers, are the kids that hang out in their basement, are very pale, wear hoodies, and drink a lot of Monsters. And maybe they're not athletes, maybe they're not the cool kids. So I think it's important to paint that different picture. And you can do that using some of the tools like Tecnolochicas, because I think a lot of those videos show like very modern women that are doing CS, right? Like not what our typical hoodie in a basement guy kind of thing. Maybe even showing or inviting them on a field trip. If we can do field trips ever again, I don't know about you guys, but I'm still not authorized to do field trips. But when we can go back out in the world again, if you happen to have a Google site near you or some other tech site near you, invite your school counselor. 1, you don't need to get coverage for them. And then 2, they get to actually see what's happening, right? Let's go to another one. Number 8. So I want you guys to challenge your counselors to get rid of that conventional thinking about recruiting, right? And so typically, I think you guys are thinking about recruiting as you're the teacher who's trying to get the kids to sign up for the class. I think what works best is when counselors and teachers are working together, like specifically on certain groups of students that maybe need a little bit more confidence as they're stepping into the computing world, right? Like let them know, like, okay, the teacher said it and now my counselor said it. Wow, this must be legit. But also think about, instead of like the typical, here's a list, or here are the kids I want, or advertisements, work with the counselor to maybe do mini workshops. Or we were talking about this right before everyone came on, are there some students that are friends that if they went into the computer science class together, they might feel more comfortable. Now, I know teachers and counselors especially don't like to change schedules just so that you can be with your friend, but this might be a time to get them interested in something new that could be very beneficial and let them feel more comfortable, right? So busting that myth of like, they're not just going to be in my room talking, right? They're going to be in my room and they're going to be engaged and they're going to feel supported by each other. All right, number nine. So we want to show where computer science can lead. And this was in some of the other top 10, but I want you, when I wrote 9, or when we wrote 9, we were thinking about not only computing jobs, but how these skills translate into other skills that we want our students to know, like problem solving, like group work, like perseverance. All of those things they're going to learn out of your classes. So help the school counselor help the school counselor understand, is what I mean to say, that the computer science class also hits those goals. So the counselor may have students in mind that they need to build these skills. And so this class would be a nice way to do that. All right, number 10, big number 10. So infuse computing into existing activities in your school calendar. I already talked about the hour of code. If you're not already doing that, that would be great. But you already have things like open house, your parent teacher conferences, games, like sports games. So at these types of events, you could set up a table or an area where kids are trying some coding with, very simple things like that are in the hour of code, or maybe you're setting up some of your unplugged activities that tend to be really fun and get a lot of movement going, where students and maybe even families can play around with this. Now, I say all this to say, don't do it alone, right? Get your school counselor on board, because I guarantee you that in all of those events I just mentioned, your school counselor has a different role than you. Like, you're going to most likely be meeting with parents and bopping around, whereas your school counselor will be at the front and welcoming people, engaging with them, helping them get to where they need to be. So there's an opportunity for them to have like a little table or a station somewhere. Maybe they're going to, keep someone's little ones busy with some of those activities. Just kind of like think outside of the box there. It also says in here, work with your counselor on computer science related field trips. I talked about that earlier, but man, we love a good field trip. I miss them. I miss them very much. But I did link at the bottom here where this resource is. There are some other resources on NCWIT that can help you talk to parents. There's a top 10 list on how to engage parents. So feel free to, peruse around. I encourage you guys to, sit down with your school counselor and strategize what are both of your plan to expand your courses and expand the diversity in your courses. I can't say this enough. This shouldn't be on your shoulders alone as a teacher. And if the counselor understands what computer science is and how it benefits students and how it solves some of the problems they need to solve, they'll be more than willing to come in and help. Because I mean, not to be like, hey, look at me, I'm an example, but you know, Dr. Uche came in and said, Bobbi-Jo, you need to be doing this. Why aren't you doing this? And she taught me a little bit, and here I am away from Dr. Uche, not working with her anymore, but still engaged in helping people understand computer science. So it really does have a big impact. So I encourage you guys to talk to your counselors. Any questions about that? I know I like was kind of fast, but not really fast.
Hi, my name is Suprabha. You know what? Let me just share my video. I'm just sitting on my bed. It has been a very long day. I actually, you know, the reason why I joined, meaning I wanted to listen from you, is I literally have one or two girls in my classroom. I do not know, like being a woman teacher, and I've been in the industry. I worked as a programmer and then I started teaching. I do CSA, CSP. We also do Cisco networking. And this is my, like at my high school, this is my 6th year. It is hard to recruit girls. So I really don't know if you could, maybe any one of you could throw some, you shared a wonderful piece of information and I'm going to try a little bit of it. I also do coding club at school. It's not like the girls who code, because when I run it as girls who code, my participation drops to 1 or 2 because boys won't show up. So it's a challenge. So any nuggets, any tips would be highly appreciated.
I'll
Yeah.
say that right now we're still fighting, you know, what are boy careers and what are girl careers, whatever that means. And girls are still trending towards health careers and boys are still trending towards tech, whether that's engineering or computer science or something else related. And so we're having a hard time crossing over on either. I had a great opportunity this week to connect our African-American boys to other African-American doctors. The campaign is actually Black Men, White Coats. I have 180 African-American boys at my school. Not one of them are interested in health sciences. So where computer science is different than that is that computer science intersects with so many things. So what the counselors need to understand is when the girls are talking about interest in the health sciences or even psychology, sociology, education, helping them see where computer science intersects with that, like especially in health sciences, right? We can see that intersection very easily in materials engineering, in biomedical engineering, even sequencing, right? Like there's a lot of tech out there right now that can take our blood and sequence our DNA and figure out what's happening really quickly and diagnose things pretty quickly. There's a great video that's out there that talks a lot about careers that intersect with computer science. And one of them that's featured on there is actually Polyvore, which is a fashion website. So I think that's our in for girls, is helping the counselors understand that this connects everywhere. So regardless of where your students are going to go, they're going to need to know how to code, right? Like they're not going to be able to live in a world where you don't know how to code. That's just not going to be a thing very shortly, if not already, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, right. It's a hard sell. I'm telling you, at least today's day and age. I don't know, like New York State has been talking about mandating. I won't say mandate, but at least bring it up. The awareness has to be out there. I think there's very little awareness. The program has been in place for like decades now, but the recruitment has been like, you know, CSP, I certainly get a few, but CSA, it is a tough sell.
Well, and I think what is happening between that pathway from ECS to CSP to CSA is what's happening like in the class, right? So if you've got that one girl in ECS, she might not be as likely to sign up for CSP because she doesn't feel comfortable. So I really encourage you guys to talk to your counselors about pairing girls up. and like working on that peer recruitment, because it's tough. I mean, I talk to my students all the time, especially my students of color. It's really hard to be the only one in the room. And it's very easy to shrink yourself as women, unfortunately, right?
So absolutely, I agree. Yep. Thank you very much for, yes, your honest response, meaning, yes, I will do my best. I do connect with my counselors, and I do have handouts. I make my own brochures. Put them at their table. We do talk, but Wes, I think the idea of you sharing about meeting them at sports events or some kind of school nights, and
Yeah.
hopefully we have, right now we are all in person. So hopefully if we have, like, more of those events, I will certainly, explore one of those opportunities.
I'll leave one more thing that I'm doing at my school, because of
Yeah.
COVID, like we can't be in
Right.
person.
Yeah.
Like our parents can't come into the building really for anything.
Yeah. Absolutely. Same. Yeah. Same.
Which is fine. Like I'm more
Yeah.
about safety than seeing people at the
Mhm.
moment. But
Mhm. No, me too.
but so one of the things that I did a webinar series. And I knew that I personally couldn't fill all of the content or all of the months, right, with content. I only have so much that I can talk about. And so I commissioned my computer science teacher and my aerospace teacher. And the session was called Emerging Careers in Aerospace and Tech.
Right.
And so I gave them a platform with our parents to talk about what classes we offer, where do these jobs fall, and how much are these jobs making. And I think that has helped a little bit. This is only our second year doing it, so we'll see, right? The numbers are being crunched as we speak.
No, true. Well, let's see. I keep our fingers crossed, and let's hope for the best. Yep. Thank you.
So thank you, Bobbi-Jo. I think all of these 10 ways are, in your perspective, are great. And again, that idea of trying to engage the counselor in doing all of these things and using the counselor as a way of helping with your student recruitment. And for me, I think one of the big takeaways is using or trying to combat these stereotypes and assumptions that both students, counselors, teachers, everybody in the school might have about computer science. And these 10 ways are great ways to do that. I hope that you're willing to stick around. I think I want to continue adding to this conversation. I believe Jen is here and is wanting to jump in to share her thoughts on more student recruitment strategies. So we've heard from Bobbi-Jo about the school counselor side of things. I want to invite Jen to introduce herself and share a little bit about her experience with recruitment. So I'm going to just bring her on to the spotlight.
Great. Hello. Okay, so before my name is Jen Manley. I currently teach high school computer science. I teach a programming one course that's between CSP and CSA, and I teach CSA. And then I also teach part-time at the University of Maryland, so I do both. And I've also taught middle school computer science. And in both schools that I've taught in, the middle school level and high school level, I've been able to grow my school's program by 400% in 1 to 2 years. Mostly because my background prior to becoming a computer science teacher was in organizational growth and recruiting. And so I'm so excited to talk. I wanted to jump in on this conversation about girls because the research is so interesting on what attracts girls to computer science. And there's 3 things that consistently come up in the research for girls in particular. Number 1, girls want a community, and the wording that's used in some of the research that I really like is they're looking for a socio-academic peer group. So they are looking for other girls to connect with in an academic setting. And so if you only have 1 or 2 girls, it's going to be really hard to get more because girls are looking for that place to belong. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that girls value real world connections. And we don't necessarily need to assume that all girls like pink, right? For example, but real world connection, whether that's through health sciences or it's through like environmental things, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, just asking girls what they're interested in and then finding those connections when you talk to them. The real world connections are really, really important to make in order to get girls and then to keep them in your courses. And then the last thing that I find so interesting that also comes up in the research so often is that girls are more likely to realistically estimate their content knowledge or realistically assess their content knowledge as compared to boys. So boys, having never taken a computer science class, might look at that CS class and be like, yeah, I can handle that. Whereas a girl is more likely to say, I don't know. I've never taken programming. I don't know if that's something that I could be successful in. And so knowing that about girls, it does impact how we approach and recruit, because they are less likely to respond to what we call passive recruiting strategies. So things like putting up flyers or tabling, where you're just standing behind the table and you're not actively engaging to get people to come talk to you. Girls are not going to self-select. Well, some will, but most are not. Most are not saying CS is for me unless they have programming experience. So just a few interesting things that I think were surprising to me when I was reading research on this. So the way that I approach recruiting in my computer science classroom, I call it beyond the flyer. So one of the things that we love to do to advertise things is we put out flyers, or we wear t-shirts, or put up posters, put out an announcement. And the reality is that those types of strategies, these passive recruiting strategies, recruit very specific groups of people. And it recruits students who already know that CS is something that could be for them. So before we get into this, I want to just go over a few things that we talk about when it comes to recruiting. So who needs to recruit? You need to recruit if you're struggling to fill your CS courses. You need to recruit if your CS courses lack diversity, which could be gender, racial diversity, neurodivergence, socioeconomic status, English language learners. If there are people who are represented in your school who are not represented in your CS classes, you need to be recruiting. Or if your CS courses are jam-packed, so if your courses are full and there is no room for more students to sign up, that's a pretty good indicator that you need another section. And so you have a need to recruit because you probably could fill at least one, if not more. So for example, the high school that I teach at, when I first came in 2 years ago, we had 2 sections of Foundations of Computer Science of 30 students, so 60 CS students in a school of over 2,000 students. And it was like, there's no way that these are the only students who are interested in computer science. This year, so this is my 3rd year teaching at this school, we have 9 sections of computer science, a full CS pathway, and we have Foundations, CSA, CSP, and this Programming 1 course. So that didn't happen just because of me. That happened because the students were already there. They just weren't being approached in the right way to know that CS was a course that they could take, right? The thing that a lot of kids were telling me was, oh, I didn't even know that we offered this. And it was like, yeah, well, we didn't. We offered Foundations, but now we offer this full pathway. All right, next slide. Sorry, I'm like on a roll now. Okay, so there's a few myths that we tell ourselves about recruiting. The first thing that we tell ourselves is we say, if students wanted to take computer science, they would sign up. We also say, if I recruit other students, it will take spots away from students who really want to take the course, and that's not fair. And then finally, we say, my classes are full, I don't need to recruit. But there are some truths that we need to replace those myths with. The next slide. There are students in your school who don't know that CS is an option for them. They'd be great fits for your program, and they just have no idea that it's a course that they could take. Girls fall into this category a lot of the time. They don't know that CS is something that they could take or that they would be good at. The earlier students take computer science, the more likely they are to pursue it, which is amplified for girls and other underrepresented groups. So I was saying, I teach a college course. I teach an introductory CS course for college, and it is the most diverse course in the computer science program at the school I teach at, partially because if students haven't taken CS before they get to college, if they're girls or underrepresented, an underrepresented population, they're less likely to pursue it as a major. And then finally, if your program lacks diversity, but it's full, it matters that groups are being excluded. So for example, the school that I'm in, the first year that I came in, our courses were full. I had no more room. But like you, I had a lot of boys, right? And so I needed to expand my program in order to make space and be able to recruit more girls into the program to diversify who was taking computer science. All right, next slide. Okay, so I was talking about this earlier, but we have two different types of recruiting. We have passive recruiting, which is something that most teachers are doing. And they're saying, I'm doing all this work, I'm doing all this recruiting, and I'm not seeing any growth. And if that's the case, in all likelihood, you're doing some forms of passive recruiting. So passive recruiting typically looks like offering the same features to every student. So selling computer science the same way to every kid. Oh, computer science is so great. It's a career where you can make a lot of money. That's what that might look like. Or it's so great, it's something where you can be creative. Or it's so great because you can work with logic, right? So selling it the same way to many students or to every student. Assuming that the kids who want to take CS will take CS. And then finally, using passive strategies like hanging up flyers or relying on the course listing to get students to sign up. And I love, Bobbi-Jo, that you talked about counselors, and I'm going to talk about counselors too. Counselors are such a good way to make sure that all of our students are being offered computer science in a way that is appealing to them, right? That makes sense for them. All right. And then active recruiting, if we can click it. Active recruiting acknowledges that students are individuals with different needs and different reasons for taking your course. So I mentioned before, my background is in recruitment. Before I became a teacher, I was doing organizational recruiting for some nonprofits, national level nonprofits, who were recruiting college students. And one of the things that we always talk about is we have to sell our organization, or in this case, our class, based on what our client or the student needs, right? Every student is different, and the reason for them taking your class is not necessarily and not usually the same as the kid that's going to be sitting next to them in that class. So we need to acknowledge that our students are different, they have different needs, and we have to speak to those needs. We also assume that kids who would love CS have to be exposed to it as an option. So if all we're doing is putting up flyers, we're looking then at the kids who are self-selecting to take CS. And instead, we need to figure out how can we expose CS as a realistic option to as many kids as possible so they can make an informed decision about whether or not it's a course they would be interested in. And then finally, instead of these passive strategies, we're going to prioritize authentic connection with students as foundational to recruitment. So the big tagline with all of this is people join people. Okay, so your students are joining computer science because they've connected with you, or they've connected with a counselor, or they've connected with another student that's taking computer science who has made them believe that this is a course that they might like and that they could be successful in. So our goal with all of these recruiting strategies is how can we prioritize connection so that students see your classes as places where they can belong and places where they can succeed. All right, so in order to do this, I'm going to talk through 4 modes of recruitment. So the first one, I'm going to actually switch this around. The first one is to work with counselors. I totally agree with you, Bobbi-Jo. Working with counselors is a wonderful mode of recruitment. It's low effort on your part because somebody else is doing a lot of the work of talking with the students. We're going to go to the students. So there are ways that we can connect with as many students as possible. We're going to tap into the other teachers at our school and collaborate with them in order to identify students who might like or be successful in CS. And then finally, if it's an option for you, and this last one depends on buy-in from your administration, but you also can visit your feeder schools. So the other interesting thing about girls is what we find is that the earlier we reach them, the more likely they are to take our courses. So tapping into your feeder schools, the 8th graders that are going to come in and be 9th graders in your school and recruiting them to take a computer science course is a really great way to build diversity in your program. The bottom line is that the more students you talk to, the more students you can recruit. If you are able to get one-on-one time with a student, whether it's you, another teacher, or a counselor, and you can connect with them on a one-on-one level, the more likely you are to recruit them to join your course. Okay, so our first strategy is to go to the students. And in the slides, if you're in them, all three of these little bubbles on the side are resources for you to use. So an email template, a presentation, and scheduling materials. So our goal with going to the students is to get face-to-face with as many students as possible. The way to do this, the most efficient way to do this, is to connect with one department chair in your school. I like to go through math because math teachers tend to immediately see the connection between math and computer science, but you could choose any subject to connect with. And the reason I choose one is because if I try to go to lots of different courses, I might see the same students multiple times. But if I only go to math courses, or I only go to social studies courses, or I only go to science courses, I'm more likely to see a wider array of students. So you'll connect with the department chair, you'll share your goal, which is to expose more students to computer science. And then your goal is to coordinate as many classroom visits as possible to highlight the differences between the courses that you offer and offer to students to talk with you or to talk with another colleague one-on-one if they want to discuss their options. You're not going to be able to get to every course though. So if you can't get to certain ones because they don't meet during your planning period, you can create a short video for classes that you can't get to and ask the teacher to show it in their classes. And then finally, you're going to offer students the chance to schedule a one-on-one meeting. So this looked like, for me, it was going into math classes, doing a 5 to 8 minute presentation so I could hit anywhere between 6 to 8 in one planning period, do a 5 to 8 minute presentation, get my face in front of the students, tell them about the different courses, and then offering them the chance to schedule a one-on-one meeting with me. I used Calendly, but you could use a Google form, right, for students to request that one-on-one meeting. All right, next one. All right, so the second strategy, and Bobbi-Jo did a whole presentation on this, so I'm just going to talk about one strategy that I used. So for me, working with counselors means giving the counselors the tools that they need to advise students on the best computer science course for them. So for girls and underrepresented groups, we know that their first exposure to computer science and being successful in that first exposure is really important. And so it's really important, if you offer more than one course, and it sounds like several of you do, that we're making sure that when a student talks to a counselor, they're figuring out what the best fit might be for them. So what I did with my counselors is I scheduled a meeting with the counseling department. I made a one-pager that clearly outlined what the different, and this is clickable, I think, so you can click and get my one-pager. But it included prerequisites, some potential pathways, misconceptions. So for example, a student doesn't need to be in honors to be able to succeed in computer science. They don't even need to be an honor student to succeed in APCSA, right? That capstone course. They might not be successful in some of their other courses and be really successful in CS. And so we had that meeting with the counselors, left them with a one-pager, and thinking about how we can help counselors streamline because they are super busy. So for me, that meant showing up during their counseling department meeting so that I could answer any questions, I could give out that one-pager, and they left that meeting feeling equipped to have conversations about computer science with students, and knowing that if they had students that they were kind of on the fence about, they could reach out to me and we could have conversations based on particular students. All right, next one. The next strategy, and this one is so good, is to generate a names list. So all of these, again, are tagged on the side bubble there. So what you're going to do is run what's called a names list build, either during a faculty meeting or during department meetings. Live is best, or worst case scenario, you'll send out a Google form. And what we're doing with this, and I've included the names list presentation here, is we're having our teachers in our school help us brainstorm lists of students that they think might be really good fits for computer science. So my names list mind joggers are things like students who are creative, students who care about impacting the world around them, students who are really successful at logic puzzles, like students who like working collaboratively, right? So we're going to walk through that process with our teachers. And then we're going to send out an email to all of the students who were named by these teachers. And we're going to say, hey, Sarah, you were identified by Miss Tyler as somebody who might really like computer science. Here's a short video, and if it's something that maybe you'd be open to, I'd love to schedule a time to meet with you one-on-one and talk about computer science and why it might be a great fit for you. So again, we're having that one-on-one contact with as many students as possible, and we're tying it into a teacher that they know, care about, and respect, as identifying them for this special opportunity, right? Seeing qualities in them that align with our courses. If you don't have time to go to a faculty meeting or a department meeting, you might send out a Google form. And if I do that, I'm going to incentivize participation with something like the department that gets the most names, I'm going to bring you donuts to your next faculty meeting. So incentivizing them to give us as many names as possible. And then finally, like I said, following up and making sure you're emailing those students and offering to connect with them. So this is a way, especially in a high school where you might have thousands of students, to be able to get in front of students who you never would have been able to run into because they've formed a connection with another teacher. And then the last one. Bobbi-Jo, I think you put this in the chat too, but yeah, so visiting your feeder school, it has to be fun. So this is a way for us to connect with rising ninth graders to expose them to offerings. This is so good for a few reasons. Like I mentioned, the younger we get to girls and other groups, the more likely they are to take our classes. But if you're a school that offers a computer science pathway, meaning you offer multiple courses, and Bobbi-Jo mentioned this too, if a student takes that first course, that ECS course, then that sets them up to be able to take APCSP and then be able to take APCSA. And so when we get to students when they're 8th graders and they're going to be 9th graders, we're getting them at the very beginning of that pathway, and they're more likely to become completers, right? They're going to take more CS courses. So the way that this looked for me, and what I do is I connect with science teachers at the feeder middle school or 5th or 6th graders at the elementary level, because computational thinking is in the NGSS. It's in the science standards that they use. So I approach it from that direction. So I say, hey, I would love to come to your class and do a computational thinking lesson. I do a 15-minute activity, or I take 15 minutes so I can see, again, multiple classes during one class period. Do an activity. So I like program the teacher because it's low materials and kids get really into it. So I'll like bring my water bottle, put it at the back corner, and have them as a group try to write a program to get me to that water bottle without dumping it on my head. I joke about dumping it on my head, and they get really into it. So I do that, the program the teacher, and then I'll introduce courses that are appropriate for freshmen. So I would never go into an 8th grade class and say, you should take CSA, right? I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, if you've already taken, a programming class in middle school, maybe APCSP is for you. Otherwise, ECS is a really good class to take as a freshman because it's going to feed into you being able to take these other courses. All right. And then just to wrap this up, and I know I went so fast, but recruitment is my passion and recruiting for CS is my passion. So if at the end of this you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, and also happy to correspond via email and obviously use all my resources. But at the end of the day, there's 3 things we want to think about. Number 1, who is missing in your class? Who is not represented, and how can we actively recruit those students to see themselves in computer science and be willing to take a chance on themselves and take our course. Number 2, you have the power to expose a student to computer science as a teacher, which could be life-changing for them. I always tell people I didn't take computer science until my senior year of high school. It was a requirement for the school that I was graduating from because I went to a science and tech magnet. And it was supposed to be a freshman class, and I put it off because I thought I would hate it, which was so dumb because I was doing logic puzzles for fun since I was 5 years old. So I was a prime candidate for computer science, but nobody ever told me that it was something that I could be good at. Whereas my sister, took CS for the first time. She's younger as a freshman, and now she's a big data engineer, and she travels the world working with clients and doing all these things. It changed her life, right? Being exposed from an early age. So you have the power as a teacher to expose a student to computer science, which could be life-changing for them. And then finally, program growth gets to be fun. It's not fun to print out a bunch of flyers and post them around the school. It is really fun to talk with kids about their hopes and dreams and interests and help them connect computer science to those things. So that's all I have. I know I went really fast. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Ooh. Cool.
Great wait time there. Thank you, Jen. It's really great to hear your experiences and hear your tips. Again, if you have questions for Bobbi-Jo or Jen, love to be able to answer those and maybe have a conversation. I think just a couple of things here before I stop screen sharing. I think we've heard from both of our guests tonight, sort of reiterating these messages that are resonating with students, and also talking with your counselors to help with recruitment. So talking and appealing to their interests and their confidence and belonging and identity. So those are 4 words to be thinking about as far as messages that resonate as you are recruiting. There were lots of resources that were shared tonight, and I'll make sure the slides are shared as well, as Jen did add lots of great resources in there. We do have a lot of resources in the inclusivcsteaching.org website, and we also have a student recruitment folder as well as we have the NCWIT resources. Again, we encourage you to use all of these and be thinking about what are you doing to actively recruit students starting now and thinking about next year and beyond as you are leading your classes. I'm going to stop screen sharing and just invite those who have questions to ask. You can feel free to unmute or type into the chat.
Hey, Jen, thank you so much for all the valuable information. I really like that. I really like the idea of one pager, like, giving it to the counselors, because that has, like, I create my own brochure too at times, but sometimes the brochure is so much, like, with a lot of information. A one pager certainly sounds like a great idea. So I was wondering, like, even if, like, you could share of the format of the one pager, that would be really like helpful designing something for my own courses. Yeah, thank you so much for all the wonderful tips.
I think it's linked. I think it's
Is
linked
it
to your
okay?
presentation.
Okay,
Yeah, and
yeah.
you can take it and use it, change it, whatever you need. And I put my email in the chat too. So if you're working through it and you have questions or you just want me
Right,
to, like, take a look at it, just send me an email and I'm
right.
happy to help.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, this is really helpful, and thank you so much for all the time you're putting into this. We just, I'm hoping that we'd have to hire a second computer science teacher. That would be the goal. Then I wouldn't be a department of one.
It is so fun when you're not a department of one anymore. I feel that.
So actually, there's another thing. I know you are a big school. We are a very small school. Our graduating class size is around 100 to 120 students. So our high school, although we run from 7 through 12, we are not more than, I would say, 3,000 7 through 12. So that's how big we are. So recruiting certainly, like, it's a crunch, and our kids are spread thin. with all the sciences, because everybody wants to major double dip into sciences and math courses, which leaves us very little room for the electives. So that's also another thing that I was thinking about, like you said, you come from a school where CS was a mandated requirement. So something like that, do you think with a small school like us, would that help us? Like, we are a small district out, in Nassau County, northern tip of Nassau County by Long Island Sound. So it's kind of difficult at times. So our maximum number of total computer science students is less than 40.
Wow. So I'd
Yeah.
love to jump on this. The first school that I worked at, the one I talked about with Dr. Uche, was a school just like what you're talking about 100 kids per graduating class, 7 through 12. We were actually 6 through 12. And there were so many science electives. And so kids were trying to take everything before they graduated. And so the way that we built our computer science department up from her to 3 people at this small school was that we started to allow it to count as a science class as opposed to an elective. The school I'm at now will count it as a math class as opposed to just an elective. So once it can start to fit those graduation requirements,
right, yeah,
it opens up some
the
electives
opportunities.
for other things.
Yes. I think true. I've been talking with my department head about this. I'm also like a one-man person doing Cisco, doing CSA, CSP, and then I also do intro to CS. So it's like a one-man show doing all those kinds of things. But you're right. Like, if we make that as either a science credit or a math credit, I think that would certainly open up our recruitment. Thanks. Yeah.
That's another reason to grab your counselor, right? Because being the only person in the building committed to it, that's where Chinma was. That's Dr. Uche. That's where she was before she grabbed my ear. And then I was like, oh my God, this solves so many of my problems. Why am I not putting everyone in computer science? And then we have a whole pathway from 6-12 before I left to join Middletown High. And that was only 3-year time span that we did that. But so I would say gain an ally with admin and with a counselor, because you can change those things with those allies.
Right. Meaning the program has grown, because prior to me, my predecessor, there were only 5 kids altogether. Yes. So from that to 25 and 30, I think we've grown in size, and which is great, which is very satisfying. Like, in terms of percentages, we have really gone through the roof. But when we look at the numbers, it's like we are small.
But you have to celebrate that percentage growth, because
absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's like you were saying, right? Like, your school in terms of size is not comparable to my school. But your percentage growth is pretty awesome. And so, like, for us, computers, FOCS counts as a tech credit, but we were also able to make CSP count as that tech credit too, which was really cool, because then kids who were looking for those AP classes that was attractive to them. And especially, you're saying you have a lot of science kids who are looking to pursue science in college.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things that you might look at, and one of the things that we looked at is, we're in Maryland. So the University of Maryland, if they end up pursuing a STEM degree at Maryland, that CSA and the CSP actually fulfill a requirement that they need for that STEM degree. And so that might be, I might choose 1 or 2 colleges that students are going to be applying to.
Right. We already we already have collaboration with one of the local SUNY schools, State University of New York schools, and we do Cisco as a part of that. And then I just the past 2 years ago, right before the pandemic, we also got approved to run the web programming, because I also teach web programming. So that class, so those 2 classes are college accredited, meaning, at the end of it, they pay some very major amount of monies to get those 3 college credits or 6 college credits if they do Cisco 1 and Cisco 2 as a 2-semester program. So, well, that, yeah, we've achieved that. And I think that also bumped up our recruitment, but we are really looking for 12-year students so that I could get somebody to work alongside me and I can prove that, hey, it's not a one-man department anymore. We need people. Yeah.
I think
Thanks.
the other
Yeah.
thing too, in working with your counselor, in looking at a couple of the very popular colleges and what are their graduation requirements, and showing that these credits that they're getting are going to potentially fulfill a graduation credit for college. So that even if maybe they're not sold on computing in order to register, you can sell it in the class. Like, this, once they start playing, generally kids tend to like it if they like problem solving. So that might be another angle. And again, another opportunity for you to work with your counselor, because they can reach out to those admissions counselors, those colleges, to get that information for you. And also for them, when they're trying to recruit during the course selection.
No, I agree. Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to interject, Bobbi-Jo, Chinma Uche was my mentor last year. She was I was so funny that when you said her name, I was like, but I didn't want to interrupt. Because I did the college boards, the mentoring circles. And so and oh my goodness, because I was going to just be giving up computer science, and she was like, no, you have to stay in computer science, you have to do this. And so I've been meaning to email her to tell her that that I wound up actually being the computer science teacher. she'll be thrilled even if I wasn't.
The joke at NC Wit, because a lot of us as consultants came in that same 2016 class, and Dr. Uche was at the CSPD and whatever, but that was that Dr. Uche was really famous, and that also Dr. Uche can talk you into literally doing anything.
Yeah.
She can't talk you into literally doing anything.
That is so funny.
And
Just,
outside of she has talked me into things, but I'll be honest, she's a good woman at heart, and she has never talked me into anything that has been fruitful for me.
Right.
So
no,
anyway,
it was just so funny because that's how it is. Like we always say, there's only 1 degree of separation in Delaware, and that's true obviously in the computer science circles as well. Like you talk to people long enough and everybody knows everybody.
Definitely speaks to connection for sure. I'm going to go ahead and thank you again to Bobbi-Jo and Jen for joining us. Thank you to our teachers for joining us and talk about student recruitment. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording for tonight, but we welcome you to join us. Each month we're going to have another webinar. These webinars are free and they'll be recorded and shared as well if you weren't able to attend live. But thank you all for joining us. I'm going to stick around. And if you'd like to continue the conversation.
Sure. Thank you very much. My only last question is there a way where we could join NCWIT? Like, is there any kind of information I was looking, or even for the girls to be a part of the organization?
I'm so glad you asked. Actually, our recruiting season for the Aspirations in Computing Award. And so any girl who has any interest in computing, they don't have to be computer science wizards. Just if they've had even a little bit of interest can apply for the award. And it will connect them with a network of girls that have been built over the last decade. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. And it's a wonderful resource for the girls. There have been people who have solved problems. Like, I'm working on this computing problem. Can you help me? All the way to job offers that have come from these connections.
Wow.
There's an educator award and a student award They also have awards for higher education. So I would also highly recommend that you wonderful educators apply for the award. The educators get a grant that comes with the award.
Wow.
So you get to get rewarded with a little bit of money because
Wow, thanks. Yeah,
very
that was good to know.
fairly
Thank-
often.
Yeah.
But I will say, NCWIT does, right now we're doing virtual sessions like this with partners all over the country. So maybe we can add these people, these participants to our mailing list if you're interested. And, as something comes up for something for the counselors, that's another great opportunity to go sneak to your counselor's office, say, hey, I saw this session was coming up. I'd love to go. Would you want to come with me? Or I'd love for you to go to this. I can't get the release time. Can you go learn something and come back and talk to me?
Okay.
Yep, I actually, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you very much.
I just put my email in the chat.
Yeah, same.
Thanks, guys.
Mhm.
We'll
Yeah.
send that off to all the important people at the NCWIT.
Well, thank you. This has been really informative, and I'm glad that I stuck it out and didn't